All right, got the legendary Tony Lewis Jr. in the building, man. Hey, thank you for pulling up, man. I really appreciate it,
Yeah,
man. It
no
really mean a
worries,
lot.
man. Happy to be here.
Appreciate you. So, just, for starters, man, for those who are unfamiliar, just talk about, where you from and, what it was like for you growing up in DC.
Yeah, so I'm from a small block in Northwest called Hanover Place. Um, so it's lower Northwest, you know what I'm saying, by the intersection of North Capitol and New York Avenue. I'm 45, so I was born in 80, you know what I'm saying, at the time of my inception. My block was the epicenter of the cocaine trade here in the District of Columbia. And, all the men in my life played a role in that, to be honest, you know what I'm saying? My father, my uncles, and everybody else, all their orbit, all their friends, all the men I grew up under. And I come from a very tight-knit community. And my mother's side of the family was, very rooted in the underworld, if you will. But a family that taught me a ton of principles, so many morals and principles and values that really created who I would become as a community leader and a public servant, But yeah, Hanover, man, has been home all my life, man. And I'm still there today. And I'm proud to say that, my wife and raising my kids there, yeah, for sure.
So, with you being, the son of, Tony Lewis Sr. and, what everything that he did, what did like when did you realize like what your father had done for a living and like how did that like kind of affect you growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some way, um, I kind of always knew. I knew he had no job. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, I think it's important to understand. That's why I sort of gave some of that context on what my family was like, what my community was like, and so it wasn't like, oh yeah, my father sold drugs, but everybody else went to work. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody in my life, especially the men, they were involved in the underworld. So, it really took me to get a bit older to more so understand how abnormal that was. You know what I'm saying? For people to be involved in the lifestyle that the culture that we come from wasn't everybody didn't live like that. And so but that comes with is also with its cons, if you will. Where you aren't like other people. There's certain things as a young person, growing up in an environment that you got to be you got to grow up fast. You got to be more aware of things that other kids wouldn't ever have to be aware of. There are also dangers on your life. People don't even think about that. Like, yeah, I was Tony Lewis Jr., but yeah, people know I was Tony Lewis Jr. You know what I'm saying? So we come from that era. People would kidnap your family, hold you from all that was a reality in my life very early on. And then once my father went to prison, my whole life got turned upside down, in the most literal way. Nothing was the same. My innocence was taken, and the most, I think, consequential thing was my mother's mental health, and how what that would mean for the next. My father went to jail when I was 9, and so him having life without parole, and then my mother's bouts with mental illness and schizophrenia, really changed, my life in so many ways.
So growing up, you had got the nickname Slug. Like where did that come from?
Yeah, so when we was young, it was originally Slugger. You know what I'm saying? When we was young, they used to put the gloves on us and let us rumble, and I got the name Slugger. From there, you know how the hood just cut it to Slug, but yeah, that's where that name come from, and through my childhood and my teenage years, I guess can handle myself. You know what I mean? So Slug stuck, and really that's my name for if you ever around me and anybody that grew up with me, you know what I'm saying? You only gonna hear a small amount of people call me Tony. You know what I'm saying? Most people call me Slug. You know what I'm saying? That's my name.
So you described your early childhood as like luxurious, private school, designer clothes, big house.
Yeah.
What's like your earliest memory of that lifestyle? Or like what are some of your memories
Nah,
about
I
that
got
lifestyle?
you. Yeah, yeah. Some of my earliest memories really involved me, my dad, um, my mother in the house. You know what I'm saying? My cousins Rico and Antonio, my cousins Don and Kevin. Coming over and just like being able to do whatever we want. You feel me? Like go wherever we want. My father would take us out a lot, wherever it's the movies, shopping. We stayed in Georgetown a lot. White Flint Mall, that was a big thing back then. You know what I'm saying? But then, going to prize fights, Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler, Mike Tyson versus Michael Spinks, going to the Super Bowl, the Redskins. I mean, those memories, the Super Bowl memories are vague, but I was like 3, 4 when that happened. But the fights is vivid. I remember them like from, all the way through. But yeah, my early life. And then a lot of family gathering in Hanover, my block, like, Hanover was like everything. Everybody I knew, our whole world collided on Hanover every day, man, in the most beautiful way. And I value that, like, because for all the trauma and torment and problems that came, like, after my father went away, I just thank God that I did have those memories. Those memories kept me, if that makes sense, I could reflect on those times because we had them.
When your father told you, I might not always be around to get you what you want, how did that hit you and affect you back
Yeah,
then?
that ain't me. I ain't know what that meant then. That's one of them things that resonated after he was gone, because up until that point, though, he had always got me whatever I wanted, and like literally, like whatever I wanted, you know what I'm saying? And I wasn't like no bratty type kid, but like if I say, Daddy, I want something, for him to tell me no and then give me that afterwards, it was clear that, I mean, in hindsight, that he knew what was imminent. He knew what was on the horizon, you know what I'm saying? But so my reflection on that was like, like that's what he meant. But it was strange. It was weird. It was like unusual when we was in Georgetown Park Mall and Foot Locker, and for real, I'll never forget that, because that's how significant that no was. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So you talked about, kind of like the pros and cons that came with, being the son of somebody like Tony Lewis Sr. Did you ever like have like any like conflicts or like fights like growing up, anything because of like who your pops was? Like,
Nah, my father was well respected and loved. He wasn't a guy who people feared. He wasn't a guy who had a lot of issues. Certainly growing up, and this is another thing I think that's important to note, right? So my father go to jail when I'm going on 9, right? That mean all my peers the same age. So he didn't necessarily really like impact their lives, and we still kind of young, even though people might have talked about him or whatever, but they still was young as well. So my peers, it wasn't really like that, and if some dudes might try you if they don't like the level of like respect or reverence that other people give you, you know what I'm saying? But again, I was always a guy who, you know, I was respected as well. And I was Slug. I wasn't Tony Lewis Jr. to my peers. That's something that, like, if the older dudes knew or the adults knew, but I didn't really walk around like, oh yeah. You know what I'm saying? And the reality of my father wasn't there anymore. You know what I'm saying? He was in prison. And so it wasn't like what I think a lot of people assume when it comes to that in my peers. You know what I'm saying? My dad definitely was larger in life and all that, but that's not how I walked around. Like, yo, my father is. Nah, I wasn't dead. I don't even, you know what I'm saying? I don't even talk like that. But yeah, so nah, to answer your question, nah, I ain't really had no problems because of that.
was it not saying like you would be ashamed of your father or anything, but like was it kind of like a priority for you to like kind of not be known as a Tony Lewis Jr., like Tony Lewis Senior's
Well,
son, but more so like.
that's a good question. Nah, not that either. It was just, if you know, you know. You know what I'm saying? And like, again, back to what I was saying before. Also, you got to be very careful sometimes. I was a very tutored kid as it relates to the streets. You know what I'm saying? I was very educated in the ways of the streets, and there was a potential danger in walking around letting everybody know who you were. You understand what I'm saying? Because you did not know what kind of outstanding problems, or if people thought there was still a bankroll around or whatever. Yeah, that was always a constant in my life. So it was more from that lens. But yeah, if you knew, you knew. If you didn't, you didn't. I just showed up how I showed up. But I'm surely right there in that, on that same block, in that same community every day. You know what I'm saying? So like, clearly, especially people that were older than my age group, they were fully aware of like who I was.